For the record, we have no apologies. I have the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I sign those as a correct record? Thank you. Do we have any questions as to accuracy of the meetings? No. Thank you. Matters arising from the previous meeting. The budget monitoring report, April to July, a member asked about non-employee costs. Was there anything that could be checked on a month-by-month basis over the financial year period? The head of finance and assets has agreed to look into that further. Performance management, Q1, a member asked about fire safety audit performance, and given the context of the authority's previous cause for concern for protection and the work that went on addressing it, were officers confident that the services are not taking a step back? The Deputy Chief Fire Officer suggested that a report be brought back to members to show the breadth of the protection work. The head of prevention and protection advised that a protection assurance report would be presented to the Fire Authority in December. The Deputy Chief Fire Officer reassured members that on a monthly basis, the CRMP Performance Board, chaired by the Chief Fire Officer, would look at all the live data. With any reports coming to the authority, there was a slight lag, but perhaps a review of the timescales to align them better for future years so that members would receive the quarterly information closer to the quarter end. The Deputy Chief Fire Officer advised that the Q2 report had been brought forward to this meeting to speed up the reporting process. The Deputy Chief Fire Officer advised that a workshop for members on performance could be held if required. The Data Intelligence Team Manager advised if members would like a workshop, this can be arranged in the new year. A member asked for a typo correction relating to Prince's Risborough. The Data Intelligence Team Manager advised that had been corrected. A member asked about the appliance codes under resources on over-the-border mobilisations out of BFRS grounds. It would be more helpful to know where those appliances were located. The Data Intelligence Team Manager explained the error and that the report would be corrected before it went to the authority. Hopefully that covers all of those points. Item 4, disclosure of interest. Do we have any disclosures of interest other than those already reported? None, thank you. Questions? Katie, do we have any questions to the executive?
None, Chairman.
Thank you. So moving on to item 6. We have, I think next is recommendations from, we've got the report from Anne-Marie.
Yes, it's a recommendation from the
recommendation.
Anne-Marie's going to talk through it.
So Anne-Marie will be talking to us now.
Thank you. So good morning. I'm presenting this paper today on behalf of Liam Palmer, our Risk and Business Continuity Manager. This paper was taken to the Overview and Audit Committee on the 5th of November and was approved for submission to the exec today. The risk management policy and framework are a refresh of existing documents that were previously approved by the Fire Authority in 2021. Following the introduction of the new Community Risk Management Plan and updated internal governance, we felt it was an appropriate time to review and refresh those documents. When refreshing the documents and looking at how we manage risk, the focus has been on how can we improve clarity to all stakeholders involved. Liam has engaged with partners across the LRF, including Thames Valley Police, to share best practice, and we thank them for their support. There are a few areas in the framework I just wish to highlight. The first is around risk scores. As detailed on page 29 of your pack, we have moved from a 2-score approach to a 3-score approach with the introduction of a target score. Adding a target score shows the desired end state, making it easier to visualise progress and plan interventions. It will also help prioritise actions if the gap between the current score and the target score is large. We know that more work will then be required. Many organisations have adopted this approach and it does firmly align with best practice. The second area to highlight is the risk register template. On page 36 of your pack, you will see we have updated the risk register template we will use to update members and put into the public domain. We believe it's easier to read and shows an increased focus on the actions that we're going to take with ownership and timescales. I understand that the new format may take some time to get used to, but rather than reading one big list of each risk now, we hope that the template adds more structure, and we will only include the latest update to make it clearer. The final area to highlight is the introduction of the organisational risk group. Internally, our approach to risk management is reinforced by the introduction of this group. The group discusses risks from across the service and offers a way for all colleagues to escalate things of concern which follow the governance process. So internally, colleagues can be put at ease knowing what they escalate will be shared with and considered by senior staff in the service. This group allows the conversation of risk to be more joined up. We are aware of a formatting issue on one of the pages of the pack with the flowchart, which will be updated before this gets published. Thank you for your time and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for the report. Firstly, I think the change to the governance structure and the way you're trying to drive the thread through is really welcome. I suppose a couple of things that just struck me as I was reading through it. So firstly, it'd be really helpful just to understand in a bit more detail, when you say it aligns with best practice, how you've gained that confidence, where have you been and tested it? Is that inside the fire service sector? Is it outside the fire service sector? Kind of what have been the benchmarks that you've used? And that kind of leads to a second broader question, which is how, from where we were with the previous risk management policy, how do you think this approach is going to help us manage our risk better? What's the so what of the change? That's really helpful to understand. And then just a final, I guess, slightly more detailed observation. The risk monitoring and risk appetite stuff is good. I suppose what's missing for me, which is what happens in organisations that I've been in, is look at the aggregate cumulative risk that the organisation is building up through all of it. So we're tending to look at risks in a very linear, individual way. I think what it's lacking is probably something that looks at what's the aggregate risk that the organisation and the service is delivering. It's just good to understand your thoughts on that and how we might build that into the policy.
Thank you. So in terms of testing your best practice, I can't remember the ISO standard off the top of my head, but we have looked at an ISO standard. We're also due to have our risk management process audited later in the year. I think it's back end of Q4, early Q1. So hopefully that will give us some reassurance that we have followed the best practice. In terms of Thames Valley Police, they had a look at the framework before we shared it. So again, just getting some external assurance to what we were doing. I think in terms of, just going to jump around a little bit. So in terms of the aggregate riskable scores, we are looking at how we can combine risk registers into one format. So at the moment, at a directorate level, we have 4 risk registers. Actually, what we want to do is put them into one format so we can start to understand if there is a people risk and it's across all 3, we're seeing it in one place rather than seeing it disparate. So hopefully that will give us a better understanding of an aggregate size of the risk. Also, the number of risks, having them all in one register will give us that visibility. The last part was about the so what of the change. I think that's going to come over time. So hopefully by you seeing the risks and coming here and seeing that we're making progress and mitigating some of those risks, that will give you better visibility of so what of the change. Let me do this.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Stutchbury and then Councillor Hussain.
Yeah,
and then I think Councillor
I welcome the questions. I think they're good questions. I think what I was pleased about is that this went to the audit committee and they put through it. My understanding is that they were thorough in examining it. I think that's really good. I think this is the moving piece. It's about clarity, openness and whatever. And I think the points that Simon's made should be taken into consideration. But it's all about being able to, my understanding of it is, I haven't been gone through it, it's about members and be able to have clarity and be able to see things and be able to make decisions and observations at an earlier stage to be able to be better governance. I think that's the approach that we have, and I think that points made can be taken on board, and we need to work to make sure that what we do is visible and can be judged, criticised, commented on and improved, and that's the basis that I see it of. And I I welcome the work that's put into it. Thank Anne-Marie for your time that you've done on it. And had there been any serious concerns raised by the audit committee, I think we would have been discussing those today, but there wasn't. So I'm hoping that, as it says, it's the ISO standard. I think that gives us a reasonable, good way to go forward. So that basis, I was happy that this came forward with effective and had been to the audit. Enough said, really. We will obviously amend it and work with it as it goes forward because it's a new format.
Any further points, you do? Councillor Priestley.
I've been instructed I have to press it harder. I'm sure you can hear me now. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. And I think these are some really welcome changes in terms of how you intend to manage the display, but also the explanation of risk going forward. I guess mine is more a supplementary point to Councillor Rouse's point around looking at the aggregate. So, for example, if we are coming to these meetings every sort of 2 months and you present a snapshot, a caption of what's going on, how are we able to see that snapshot in relation to the range of risks that have been sort of put forward over the last, say, quarter or 6 months in a way that doesn't put the burden on you to bring that to these meetings? So I guess the question is, what would be the logistics and the mechanics of that to enable us have that viewpoint? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think it's probably something I need to go away and consider. I think there is something about how do we display maybe the total number of risks that we're considering as an organisation outside of the corporate risk that we're sharing, so that then you can have that understanding that whilst you might only be seeing 9, there are maybe a further 30 that sit underneath that are being reviewed and assessed, and maybe by grade as well will give you that reassurance that it's not just that at the top that's being looked at, it's everything else that sits underneath. But we'll definitely take that into consideration and provide a wider update.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for the report. Just picking up on some things that colleagues already mentioned, what's the trigger for something to go onto the corporate risk register? Because if you get to a point you don't add it, it doesn't go in the aggregate. You add too much, the aggregate goes up. So the explanation on that would be helpful.
Yeah, so it's a combination of risk and SLT judgment. So that understanding of what is the risk score, but also what's the potential. So current risk score would put it up there. If we haven't got enough mitigations, then it would still be displayed, but also a conversation at SLT. So every month at our performance board, we discuss those risks to understand whether there's anything we wish to highlight up.
Thank you.
I think it's important that we note that we have that additional internal performance review board, the corporate risk. So, but a good point made, I think, Councillor McLean, that we need to be aware of what triggers. Any further questions? Thank you, everyone. It's moving on then to the recommendation that comes from the Overview and Audit Committee. We've heard Councillor Stutchbury, who was on that at that meeting. We approve this report? All approved? Agreed? Thank you. Management. Craig, when you're ready.
Thank you. Morning all. So this is the second report since we launched our new CRMP, so for the Q2, and that's from July to September. Just very quickly, I'll do an overview as we normally would. I'm not going to go into any details of specifics other than the ones we've highlighted. I'll leave that for the questions for the room. We do within the front cover page, we provide that overview of how we're doing as a performance and as score metrics, but we also provide a couple of highlighted measures, 2 of which are celebrating success, and one of being our objectives and half-year review, where we've reached our very high target on that. So that's a great success, and there's a bit of commentary in there to support that. The other One is in relation to social media engagement. We had a great year last year. We've surpassed that this year to the point actually in October we've surpassed our total year for last year engagement. So it's a really good news story, and we just wanted to highlight that. There are a couple of other bits. Bank shifts is in there just to provide a bit of clarity on that, and I can go into more detail if need be. And then the availability on call, but we'll bring that up later, I'm sure. So other than that, I'll just happily hand it over to the group for any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we'll stay off on call in this discussion, certainly. So firstly, just on two positives that I just wanted to recognise. So I remember sitting in a room, I don't know, 3 years ago, where we were debating whether it was possible to deliver volume and risk focus in home fire safety visits. And I have to say, it's hugely encouraging to see that we've delivered both at the scale that we're now delivering it. I just wanted to put on record recognition for the transformational journey that we've been on with that, and congratulate officers for it. And just on the last point that you made, I have to say, I think we would all say that the social media of the service is absolutely superb. I mean, I would say it's better than lots of corporates that invest significant amounts in it. So again, just wanted to put on record that I think that's a really strong part of the service. Three things I just wanted to pick up, and one's a sort of bringing together of two bits of data, which is the concerning change in trajectory on bank shifts, which obviously had been an area of real improvement as a result of the whole time establishment uplift, and what looks like a downturn coming in whole time availability. And I just I know that what's being pointed to in the report is training and leave, etc. But I just want to come back to something I think I raised a couple of executive committees ago, which is I do wonder, particularly as when we get to the finance report, we're looking again at an underspend for the year, whether the time is coming to go back round what the right whole time establishment number should be, because it seems to me that we are in a situation where the necessary skill, training and everything else that's going on is now beginning to lead to, if I follow through what you're saying is causing it, lead to an uplift in bank shifts and an uplift in, so a downturn in availability. And that's not a place that any of us want to get back to. So just welcome officers' view on, is it the time to come back round the whole time establishment? Can we look at how we might do that? Secondly, I sort of recognise, and I think I saw I can't remember whether it's in the minutes or else, that we're getting a paper on protection in November. But I just remain still a little bit with a little bit of angst over the fire safety audit trajectory, which was, I know it's improved a little bit, just still isn't where we need it to be. And I suppose I may have asked this question before, so forgive me if I have and I'm being repetitive, but I wonder whether there is something to learn about the process with which we tackled home fire safety visits, and have we looked at the learnings from that and applied it to the fire safety audits? Because again, it just, I think that is an area we really just need to turn some focus on as an authority. And then my final question is, there's quite a lot of good people metrics in here, and it triggered, and I have to say it was also triggered by a meeting I had with the FBU on Friday. I recall, and Anne-Marie will remember this, that we had a debate about moving to annual employee engagement surveys from the original biennial, and I'm sure that we agreed to that and invested in that. And forgive me, because I can't remember when the last time was we did an employee engagement survey. So could you just remind us what that was, and would it be possible to just put some maybe baseline metrics into the performance report about engagement rather than the hard people KPIs? Thank you.
Craig and Doug, I think, want to pick up on that.
Yeah, I think Paul's going to talk around that.
Paul.
Speak about protection. Sorry, could you speak your mic?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Paul's
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's
Paul's
fine,
going to speak
Councillor.
first.
I'll pick up the bank shifts question, if that's okay. Because as a narrative suggests within the pack on page 40 of the pack and 15 of the performance report, during Q2 there was an increase in bank shifts, as you can see within that as well. That was driven by a combination of a few things. That was long-term, short-term absence, seasonal leave pressures, secondments, continue with training courses which cover a wide range of courses through that activity as well. Those include BA driving refreshers, LGV initials, emergency response driving, water rescue training, ICS and USAR, all core functions of what we have to carry out within that. So that did see an increase in bank activity through a range of those activities as well. To assist in sort of to drive those down as well, we have looked at our operational leave guidance procedure, which got launched in September. And what is pleasing to see through service delivery group meeting this week is we've seen a reduction of 29% in October on that already. So it's one that we're going to monitor sort of very closely as well, because that's what we predicted that this operational leave guidance will do for us. Equally, we are getting the operational leave guidance back on the table with the FBU again in December. So we're going to revisit that document, even though it's just been launched in September. The reason we needed to launch it in September is because that is when our leave selection takes place within. So we had to make sure that we got that in place ready for that. And again, I'll take any further questions on bank if you've got any.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Councillor Rouse, for the question. I think, hopefully Paul's described some of the pressures around availability and bank usage, and we do think there's a real opportunity around next year's leave guidance that will certainly bring bank down quite significantly. In relation to the question around the establishment, we've talked about it before in this room. We are lean. We're lean at 300, and actually our current establishment is over 300. And we've talked about skills and qualifications and done a lot of good work around that. I still think there's maybe a little bit of efficiency to be gained around there, but I think Councillor Rouse is probably right that we should revisit the number quite honestly. So what we know is we have an establishment of over 300 right now, but that's a different thing to the real number, i.e., bums on seats on a daily basis for some of the reasons Paul's outlined. So, sickness, training, other absences, and it is lean, and it's trying to find that right balance of what's your sort of base establishment and thinking about budgetary pressures, because actually bank and what other services ultimately call overtime is quite an efficient model to use, but there's a tipping point where it becomes inefficient. So I think, certainly a discussion around whether the number is right and whether there's an opportunity to increase it a little is probably appropriate to have and bring back to members.
I think it's a really important debate for us to start to have ahead of the budget setting for next year. So I certainly welcome that coming.
I agree entirely, Councillor Rouse. And in fact, you may recall I raised the issue myself 2 or 3 meetings ago as to what our true establishment is and should be. Sorry, the protection question.
In Adam's absence, I'm happy to pick up protection. I think hopefully in December, Adam will be able to present a relatively positive picture about around our protection journey. We did set ourselves quite challenging targets in terms of audit numbers, and since our inspection, we've more than doubled the audit numbers we achieved. So I think that's important to note. Also implementing a really robust risk-based inspection program that kind of drives that audit activity. And actually, having seen October's figures, we've exceeded our target in October. So there is some positives around protection, and I think we can tell a really good story both to members and HMI when they come in February. However, one of the things Adam will identify when he comes back to members in December is some of the challenges that still exist around protection, and predominantly that's around recruitment and retention. So it is a really, really challenging market. You go out for a fire safety inspecting officer when you've got a vacancy, and you just don't get competent, qualified people because they can earn so much more in the private sector. And we do, therefore regularly we will be carrying probably a percentage of vacancies in the team. We will also have a number of staff that are in development roles and therefore aren't, kind of operating to 100%, if you like. We have done quite a lot of work around that insofar as we've put in place various roles now that sit kind of from business safety apprentices through to fire safety advisors, fire safety inspecting officers, team leaders, etc., etc. And that does give us a layer of resilience in terms of when you might lose people out the top. We've got people sort of a pipeline, if you like, which is really positive. But it does have its limitations. What we've identified, I suppose, Adam and I recently, is we think we probably do need a sort of further layer of resilience, if you like, around the protection team. So actually, over a period of time, we have underspent our protection budget on the basis that where we have vacancies for a period, or where we have staff in development roles that aren't achieving the full pay, we think we can use some of that underspend to add some additional layers of resilience. And that could be lots of things. And this is what we're working through. So, for example, when we have peak demand, I don't know, a spike in consultations coming in that need addressing, or a number of kind of reactive pieces of work that need to be done, demand-led rather than risk-based inspection-led, making use of internal or external associates is one of the things we're looking at. So, for example, we qualify some of our station end staff and we offer them a dual contract role, and we have a budget that allows us to kind of draw on those people rather than just relying on a sort of standard establishment. So Adam's paper in December will hopefully talk through some of that stuff in a bit more detail, i.e. what does the demand look like, how are we meeting that demand and delivering on risk-based inspection, but also some of the challenges and how we seek to address them moving forward.
Thank you, Doug. Well, we certainly look forward to Adam's report next month and the opportunity to discuss that further. Sorry, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got two questions, so if it's okay.
Sorry, Chairman. I asked about the employee engagement survey. Was the other one?
Yeah, so we have moved to an annual survey now. The last one took place in May, so the results are out there, so we can make sure we provide a summary back to members. And we have committed to do it annually, ongoing. We're going to move it back ever so slightly just because of HMI, because HMI will also do a staff survey early next year. We don't want to kind of over survey people.
Whereas Councillor Hall.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to ask two questions and do them separately, if it's okay with you. So my first question is on page 18, over the border mobilisations into our area, and the table at the bottom left of the page. Gerrards Cross and Beaconsfield, obviously, we understand why those mobilisations are high, but Aylesbury having 57 to me is unacceptable. I'm also not happy that West Ashland have 32 and High Wycombe have 19, because those are our three busiest stations, and that really does concern me. But Aylesbury in particular, and going back to the previous conversation about the whole time numbers and the target of 300, I think this is a good time to plan to have those numbers sufficient to have an extra whole time pump on the run. And I think perhaps, I don't know, it's an operational thing, but to me it says Aylesbury should possibly have that additional whole time pump on the run, or something in the vicinity of Aylesbury that can get those numbers down, because, you know, when fire engines are coming into Aylesbury from Bicester, that's a long way. When they're coming from Amersham, that's a long way. When they're coming from High Wycombe, that's a long way away. So, you know, the Aylesbury, the West Ashland and the High Wycombe, they're unacceptably too high. So I'd like officers to respond to that one first, please, and I'll ask my second question.
Okay, so I can pick up on some of that. While I can understand why the numbers look alarming, it is a difficult situation. A lot of it is to do with geography. So take Aylesbury, for example. Aylesbury is a giant station grounds. It goes quite far out, including the little dinky bit that comes out on the right hand side, which then has 3 other stations around it. So it does come back to, most of the time it is quickest. So that's been our policy. We could change that. I don't think we'd want to, but that is something we could look at doing. The other part is about when it comes to about PDAs, and a lot of the times when you see numbers on here, let's take a high rise, for example. If we were called to a high rise, the PDA for a high rise is 6 pumps. So we then have to call 6 pumps, the quickest 6 pumps. Then, because Aylesbury is a critical station, we would then ensure that there was another pump at Aylesbury. So quite often, it's us calling in a standby pump to sit at that pump. So that's where Aylesbury, you'll see the Aylesbury go high. but then it's returned normally within 5-10 minutes, because we'll get to that high rise, it'll be a false alarm, and then we return it. So while you see 54, a lot of those are generally about 5-10 minutes, and half the time they're returned before they've even left their stations. So I appreciate the numbers look high. Where it comes in is we look at the times as well, and that's where it's more crucial. So that's why Aylesbury and Wickham, West Ashton, you normally see higher numbers, because there's more high rises, there's bigger PDA incidents, predetermined attendance, where we attach more appliances, which then require them to have a standby move that comes in. So as soon as controls see a big incident, they will put something into that, and that's where we normally get the over the border. I appreciate that we do have an over the border report that we've produced that shows all of this, how it's done, where the first, second, third pump, all of that, the cost to each location. That might help alleviate some of the concerns you have, which we can probably look at offline, but just to try and help alleviate some of those fears.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Horn.
Thank you, Chairman. And the second question is on page 13 on the average attendance times. Very good figures. Very, very happy with those average figures. What I'd like to see reported in the future, because Councillor Walsh, some of you probably don't know, did highlight this a few months ago. He was at an incident, and it took the fire engine more than half an hour to arrive. So what I'd like to see in this report are our worst attendance times. So if we're regularly taking half an hour or 45 minutes to attend, I'd like to see that, so that we've got visibility of it, and then, you know, if it's a problem, then we can address it. But averages are good, but obviously it doesn't tell us what our worst times are, and I really would like to delve into the detail and understand that more.
Yeah, okay, that's something we can probably do. We'll take it back through the governance structure first, but we can definitely report on those worst of times. The only thing I would say is there are, we'd have to be quite clear on when we share that, because there are times where we are reported to a street, for example, and we get there and a car on fire, the break, and we spend a considerable amount of time looking for it, and then we sometimes we book in then when we can't find it today. So that can show longer sometimes, but we'll try and make that clear on that report. But it's something we can definitely help you with.
Thank you, Ray. Perhaps that's something that can be done by exception rather than as a regular report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that making the conversation, I think one of the things that we perhaps need to do is have a deep dive into the bank shifts and see where that goes, and see what evidence shows us, and see where it actually points to. I think it's a pretty prudent engagement. I think it's pretty prudent to do. I'm just looking for my correspondence from Region Work 12. That correspondence is quite fluid, and has been even in the time when we were going through the HMIC FR reports. We were getting engagement from the union at that point over that. I thought it was very useful, very constructive at that time. The difficulties we had to actually turn the service around, I think they were key in achieving that. I also believe that when it comes to the discussing on-call availability, that will be something we will discuss going forward. I think it's also fair to say that the duty to collaborate, I think we need to discuss a little bit around the duty to collaborate. I think that is something that all fire services across the country have the duty to collaborate. And I think there needs to be some clear evidence-based reasons why that happens, and that we go to other people, they come to us, and that's based around safety provisos. It's not based around anything else. So we need to do that. And yes, I do agree. We've had a lot of social media about the fire authority lately, and I've enjoyed some of it, and but not all of it. To be fair, but I think it's fair to say that the social media of the fire authority has been very high, and some of it's better quality than others. But no, I think those things really. I think it'd be interesting to get some analysis down there. The other point made about the underspend, we have no underspend until we look at the budget as it is, and we don't know where we are with it and what might come in. We don't know what decisions may be made in the budget. We don't know what decisions will be made over the due to the fair funding review. So the idea that we have an underspend at this point and where that money might go is a clear open book, really, because we might not know any of that information. So I think they're all very good points, but I am keen that we look at those objectives because we need to make sure that we are meeting our targets. And just lastly, those were comments, but the one which I really want is a bit of explanation in the meeting around our duty to collaborate, which I think is a big key issue. And it's a key issue for every authority up and down the country, how we shift from one place to another. It's all built around safety, and I think a bit of explanation in the meeting around that would be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Stutchbury. Any further questions or comments
Not a question
about?
or about
I
the
think
duty to
Doug might
collaborate.
pick up.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we actually discuss that because it's important that people understand why.
Yeah, and hopefully I can give you some assurance, Councillor. That in the report, it talks about no opportunities to collaborate directly from this report, but perhaps that's a bit misleading in terms of there are many elements within these KPIs where we are collaborating either across FRS or within the local resilience forum or partners in local authority and other organisations around our prevention and protection activity. So I can say with 100% assurance that we do meet our duties around collaboration. There's some great examples in the Thames Valley, and although if we take over the board mobilisations as an example, although we have to be really mindful about what that looks like in terms of, you know, other services coming in to support us versus going out. We wouldn't want our own kind of risk to be propped up by other services. Actually, it's a really good example of Thames Valley collaboration working really well, where the nearest asset is mobilised to ultimately for the benefit of the community. So I think perhaps it's a bit of misinterpretation, and we can lay that out a little bit more clearly in the future in the report, but very confident that we collaborate.
Councillor Hussain.
I think we should all recognise the positives coming from this performance report and congratulate the authority. And I'm fully support. I think we all are in kind of discussing as a first order question what the established figure for the authority should be. But we've got to bear in mind what's coming over the hill, which is the fair funding review and what cuts or otherwise, or what the changes in funding that's going to bring to us. And there are reasons for the underspend, which I'll explore later. But I think a lot of those are one-offs. They're not kind of something we can build into the base for continual annual spend, which is is actually explained in the budget report, and I'm happy to go into detail on it. But I think as a first order question, what is the establishment figure that we want and is efficient from an operational point of view, but also from a protective and safety point of view? I think we all agree to relook at that, and maybe some information as to when it was looked at last. You know, where does the 300 figure come from? You know, was it established 15 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or is it something that came up more recently? And I think we discussed this in 2 previous meetings, where we were at the happy medium of being able to afford 310, 315, because that always looks after the levers and, as the officer said, sickness and all the other routine. And then by definition, it comes down to nearer 300 by definition anyway. So I would fully support that. I think most of the members would look at that as a first order question.
I'll just make a quick clarification point, just very quick. So I think it's a really excellent point from Councillor Say. We last looked at it in the February budget, where officers said that their preference was to put the money into skills mix rather than additional headcount. I think the point earlier was it'd be better for us to look at this ahead of the budget setting. And therefore, can I just clarify, I don't think we set a timeline, but I think it was implied that it would be before the budget setting. So can we clarify we'll have it in the December authority to look at what an increased headcount might look like?
I think we'll take that away and consider that for the agenda for December. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report. We've got on page 81 the energy usage, which starts saying the smart electric meters across all our sites are activated in June 2025. But we've got no data for July to September. You knew I was going to raise that, didn't you, Craig? So why? And I do like the teaser in the next sentence. The smart gas meter will be activated in Q2. So I'm definitely hoping that we'll get the report in Q3 or at the end of Q2. So can we have an update, please?
Mark, if you'd like to comment that.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Chair. This is a constant source of frustration and embarrassment for me, this one. I'm pleased to say, however, that we have now got, I think, all but 2 smart meters working. So we can actually look into detailed energy usage by station, by hour, if we want to. So we can really start to drill down into the detail, because that's the really useful operational information to help manage our energy usage. I have also recently, and I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but taken all our old bills, put them into Copilot AI and said, please give me a summary of what it is historically as well. So we're going to get a basis for comparison in there as well. So that will all be in the next report that you receive.
Thank you for your honesty. And when it's on your phone, it's even better.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Councillor McLean. Any further comments or questions? Sorry, Councillor Priestley.
Can I ask, Chairman, about the workshop that we talked about last exec meeting? Do we actually have a date for that now in terms of performance?
Simon, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Priestley. We haven't got a date set yet, but as we said in the matters of the rising, we'll get that scheduled for the new year, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Thank you, Councillor Priestley. Is that us? Okay. Thank you for your comments and questions. Let's move on then to the budget monitoring report.
Take the recommendation, Chair.
Oh, sorry, the recommendation is that the report is approved and accepted. Agreed. So budget monitoring item 8, Asif.
So I wasn't sure if Councillor Hussain wanted to introduce it for you. Perfect, thank you. Good morning, members. As at the end of Q2, the service is forecasting a net underspend of 139k against a budget of just under 43 million. This is an improvement since Q1, driven primarily by a change in employee forecasts and increased investment income. Employee costs remain the largest area of expenditure, with a forecast of just over 32.5 million, while whole-time staffing continues to show a modest overspend due to establishment levels. This has reduced slightly since Q1 due to retirement leavers. Support staff costs are still under budget due to vacant posts, which have been or are being recruited to. In terms of non-employee costs, we're forecasting at just over 10 million, with a small underspend notably around investment income, which has exceeded expectations, contributing due to stable interest rates and higher than usual investment funds. On the funding side, we're still showing just over 200k shortfall in funding, specifically due to airwave and pension grants. In terms of reserves, due to the underspend increasing since Q1, the year-end balance has slightly increased. In terms of capital, the total forecast remains at 5.8 million, with 3 million expected to be carried forward into 26-27, mainly for property projects. As of today, we've received the delivery of both rural firefighting vehicles, with one being operational and the other due to be imminently. Overall, the financial position has strengthened slightly since Q1 and remain on track to deliver within the budget, subject to ongoing monitoring of staffing and funding pressures. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to make an observation, which I recognise I'm not expecting an answer to, but I am slightly struggling with how high level we've now moved the finance report to, just in terms of ability to properly interrogate it. But I guess a couple of things. So there was a comment made earlier about we don't have an underspend and we don't know what the fair funding review is going to do to the underspend. The fair funding review will do nothing to this year's underspend. And every single year I've been on the authority, we have had an underspend. Last year, as we famously know, it's just shy of 1 million. This is revenue underspend, just so we're clear. We had, I think, 300,000 the year before, 250,000 the year before that. And every single time I've been on the authority, and it's a credit to the prudence with which we manage the finances, we've ended up with a budget and the underspend gradually increasing through the year. And if I was going to lay a bet, we will end up with a much bigger underspend at the end of this financial year than is currently projected. And you can see that when you look at the trajectory on the staff costs. And I just want to link this back to why it is really important. And I think it's great to see the collective agreement on this. We have to challenge ourselves about investment in whole-time establishment as a result of that underspend. And so I just want to stress again, I really think we should be looking at what the implications of that would be ahead of a budget discussion in February, because it will make the budget discussion in February a much more valuable discussion if we properly interrogated the impact on the service of whole-time establishment. So just a couple of questions. I couldn't quite follow, and again, I think this is because of the way that it's presented. So forgive me if I'm just not understanding it. But the movement in reserves, could you just explain some of what's going on in the movement in the workforce planning reserve, the feature funding reserve, and the revenue contribution to capital? Just so, because obviously the projected end of year balance at 11.2 million. I can't work out in my head now what that is, but percentage wise will probably be lower than we would want it from a reserve perspective. So could you just take us through what is driving those movements? And then I also sorry, I'll find through. Yeah, on the whole-time establishment roadmap. Sorry, I think it was in the performance report. You're talking about a focus on transferees to drive the whole-time establishment up, without rattling through my papers to go back to that specific line. Obviously, what this is showing, and we've been here before, showing a trajectory down to the 300 establishment. I think we all recognise that's different to the real number, as the SFO articulately put. Could you just explain to us, with that transferee plan that you've got, what different is that built into this roadmap? And if it's not built into this roadmap, why not? And if it is built into this roadmap, it would imply that we need to do more to get whole-time establishment operating above the levels that we need. And therefore, what would that be?
Thank you. I'll take the first one in terms of the first bit I just want to bring to members' attention is, and I know it was that question, it's around the underspend. I've got to kind of stress this. We've got to really understand where the underspend has kind of come from. And I know we had close to £1 million, but I could literally give 3 items that will tell you where that £1 million has come from. We had nearly over £500,000 in Treasury. And as you can appreciate, Treasury is a really difficult one to build into the base because it's all based on the level of investments we've had. Now, prior to last year, our level of investments were around £15 million a year. Last year and this year, we've had closer to 30 million. We've got reasons for that because we've received additional pension funding related to stuff that's going on in terms of remedy and so forth. And we know that that money is going to get utilised and spent over the next couple of years once that's resolved. So we're not going to have that luxury of having those additional investment funds to fund. So when we revert back to our historical numbers of investment funds, naturally our Treasury returns are going to reduce significantly. And that's on the prudent side. We've never tried to build that into our budget because once you build it in and build a base against it, once we start losing that Treasury income or we don't generate as much as we have been, we're going to have to try and offset it against something else that we're not going to have built into the base budget. But I must still stress, though, I do welcome the discussion around operational numbers because we are an operational organisation and we've got to ensure that we've got the right numbers. On top of that, in addition to that, last year, we also recognised that those additional numbers identified savings in bank. And we built that saving this year in terms of bank. So I think it was in the region of around 300k. Those two figures alone come to about 800,000. And then on top of that, we also received a one-off airways credit, which is in the region of around 300k. Now, I hope you can appreciate that these are factors that are kind of outside of our control and understanding that those were going to materialize if we knew that they were going to materialize. And even if we did know, what would we have probably done with that? In most cases, most of those are one-offs. We would have either put it as a saving, which we did with bank, and the other two we would have probably put into reserves. But I do still appreciate that we do need to have a discussion around operational numbers and how we can utilize our budget. But also in terms of fair funding review as well, it's a bit of an unknown in terms of what it may look like. So the discussion around operational numbers and funding and budgets need to kind of go hand in hand. We want to make sure any budget that we set is sustainable and manageable going forward. So that was the point more around reserve. Sorry, moving on to the point around reserves. Just bringing them up. So you mentioned there was a few reserves that you wanted to bear in mind. I think there was. No, I don't know which one it is. I just need to had it on my booklet. Okay, so the workforce planning reserve that relates to two papers that were presented last year in terms of fixed term contracts that we were going to bring in, and all we're trying to show is that kind of story from as and when we're utilizing that reserve, what the balance remains, and the balance of 240k is what the balance will be for next year to cover the end part of those posts. The ACFO post and the people director post. In terms of future funding, again, as part of the outturn report, we made a request to carry over some funds, predominantly around TNA and uniforms. Again, that was approved as part of the outturn report, and 205k of that was carried over into this year because we hadn't spent that money last year, and that's going to be spent this year. That's why that reserve has gone down to 0. In terms of transformation fund, that's literally just a movement in reserves. All we've done is we've taken out our transformation fund and we've allocated into our revenue contribution to capital. Again, the reason for that is because we've obviously got an aspirational investment plan around Westcott and High Wycombe, so we're trying to set funds aside for that. Thank you. Was there anything else?
Sorry, so that there aren't, in terms of the end balance that you're projecting at the moment, you're not foreseeing anything coming into the reserves at the end of the financial year. Is that what that's implying?
So we have got transfers into reserve that we built into our revenue budget. So that second box, which says use of or contributions to, kind of tells you the money that's kind of come into the reserves. So the only thing that we tend to see come into reserves is any funds we've set aside for our capital projects. So our RCCO, revenue contributions to capital, that's predominantly the only element that we tend to see. And usually at year end, it's any end spend that we have. The only thing I can think of off the top of my head now at present is any additional treasury income, because we've not been maximising our forecast on treasury income. Again, just to explain that aspect of it, we've got to obviously make sure we've got sufficient cash flow in place in terms of pensions. And I'm referring to Matthews at the moment. If cases were to be resolved as quickly as possible, we could see cash flow diminish quite quickly. As quickly the cash flow diminishes, that means we've got less to invest. So we're trying to take a balanced approach. As and when we know we're going to start settling those cases, we're going to probably start reducing our forecast. But obviously the base rate has been in our favour as well. There have been talks about the base rate dropping down to 3%, but it's still been quite static at 4%. So we're taking advantage of that and trying to maximise our returns where possible.
So I'm just going to ask then. So certainly, Astrid, we're not expecting you to be a foreseer of the movements of the markets, but I think it would be helpful for us to have a visibility, even if it's below the line, in what that current treasury outturn might look like, so that we've got total visibility to what the end position might be. And I understand it's not going to be perfect and everything else, but that's probably what's missing for me in the paper.
Thank you. Any further questions on Councillor Sturchbury?
So it's just the whole time establishment question.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Chair, so I was just going to cover the workforce planning question. It's a good question about whether it's kind of built into the roadmap. The short answer is yes, it is. It does move month by month, and we surface those at our CRMP meetings every month internally just to see what the lever rate is changing, and it does fluctuate ever so slightly. I think we have more flexibility about scheduling when our transferee intakes are in, so they do move. And the numbers on those can go up and down as well, so we can plan that effectively. We are restricted with our current arrangement around training. The apprenticeships, kind of when we book those in, we're booking them in probably a year in advance, and then we've obviously got the recruitment flow into that, and the moving the dates of those are pretty inflexible. The big enabler for this, if we get planning permission, will be the Westcott Venture Park, because that's going to be a complete game changer in terms of how and when we can train staff for transferee intakes, and I think it'll help us to plan for this. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is just keep it bouncing around above that 300 line, and we've already talked about whether we review that number as well.
Thank you, Councillor Sturchbury.
Welcome the enthusiasm in employing more on full-time firefighters. I think it's welcome. I think it's a positive statement. I think it perhaps could have come some time back, but any statement about employing more firefighters is a positive one. I think what we really need is, as we go through this process, we really need some core figures about what that means, how that could be funded, and if it was a decision that we went for that, how we would fund it, to make sure that we're not just doing something which then we have to then retract from. If it's going to employ more full-time firefighters, which is a good thing, and the aspirations, the comments made earlier about theoretical comments, which I welcome, again could have come earlier, about additional time on run. I think that as well, we need to have the numbers to be able to support that, because just doing something now and then finding that we can't sustain it would be worse than not doing it at all. So if there can be some numbers crunched around that, what it actually means, how it could be funded, how it could be sustained, I think that's when we can really discuss it, because at the moment it's a reasonable aspiration, but without the finances to support it, it's an aspiration. And I think it's something that everybody around here would want, but we need to actually have the resources to do it. And the comments on the underspend, listening to officers' response around it, they are less than clear what we might have to use that money for. And I take it an advisement that counting underspend against that aspiration isn't, if I listen correctly, a sustainable approach. So can we have some just broad costs about what it would mean? I think we'd welcome it. Whether we can make a decision to do it, that'll be led by the figures and the operational capabilities. But I'd suggest that maybe some figures at a future date, before the February meeting, would be prudent. Because if it could be taken, it should be taken, and if it can't be taken, we need to discuss why we can't.
I think, Councillor Secretary, we've said it is an area we're arranged to look at in more detail as soon as it's practical. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just a broad question on finance. Oxfordshire Fire and Rescue Service in the news currently, and they're having to make some quite serious cuts. Now, my understanding is, and I hope officers can answer this, Oxfordshire are funded very differently to Buckinghamshire in that they are a county brigade. So they will get their funding from the county council, which is capped at 3% plus 2% for adult social care increases. Plus with the fair funding review, I mean, I have no idea how Oxfordshire's finances are at the moment, but I can't imagine they're going to be getting an increase in their budgets, probably a decrease if we're honest. So I think it would be a good idea, Chairman, if we can actually distinguish ourselves from what's going on in Oxfordshire at the moment, because we are a autonomous fire authority and we are not capped at a 3% increase like the county brigades are. In fact, it's something more like 6% we're capped at the moment. But I do think that we need to make it clear to the public that we are not in that position, and that Buckinghamshire's finances are somewhat more robust than how Oxfordshire may or may not find itself. I don't want to commit to a figure because I might be wrong.
Councillor Hall, I think your points are made. Mark would like to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, Oxfordshire part of the county council. So as you correctly said, previous year, their referendum limit, as it were, or cap as you referred to it, was effectively 3% plus 2% for adult social care. Last year, we could increase our hours by up to £5 without triggering a referendum. Those referendum limits are approved annually, so we're not entirely sure what it's going to be for this year. Our current working assumption is that it will be £5 flexibility again.
And that's 6%, is
it? It's a little bit more than 6%.
Yeah. So just to come back on that, Chairman, I really do think it's important that we reassure our public that, you know, our finances are in a healthy much healthier situation than some authorities. I don't want to pick on Oxfordshire because that's unfair, but you know, the perception is out there that we might be in the same boat as them.
Councillor Hall. Mark would like to come back.
Yeah, sorry, without wishing to compare, the fair funding review is going to create an incredible amount of uncertainty. We're expecting to get provisional figures by the end of December, so we'll be able to articulate our financial position much better then. There is a lot of nervousness around it because as it stands at the moment in terms of principles, we get heavily penalised for being a service that's got a high tax base but a very low precept. So we've obviously made representations in the consultation, but we're kind of eagerly waiting the consultation response and those indicative figures to see what position we're going to be in. So at the moment, it's probably more uncertain than perhaps any other point since my tenure here. But obviously, as soon as we've got those figures, we'll move to reassure members as much as we can.
Thank you, Mark. Just before we move on, I think it's important that we do recognise that the fair funding review is the problem here, and that making commitments now or giving reassurances about our funding position has to be qualified against the potential downside of the fair funding review, and we are not in a position to be clear about that. Mark.
Yeah, just to articulate a bit more on that in terms of reassurance, we knew the fair funding review was coming. We'd known for a few years that it was being discussed. We didn't know exactly when it was going to hit, what it was going to look like. So when we set the budget last February, what we did, and you'll see that in the reserve figures, is we put quite a lot of money into the capital programme on the basis that should the worst happen in terms of fair funding review, we've got a cushion we can fall back onto in terms of we'll just be slightly less ambitious in some of our capital plans to support the revenue whilst we kind of consider the longer term implications of the fair funding review, because what we don't want to do is make any knee-jerk reactions. So we have been as prudent as possible in that respect to put ourselves in the best position possible given that uncertainty.
Sorry.
I think the answer to your question, well, I think from my point of view that according to Chapman, it's very different questions and very different situation, as you said. The one point that I think we do need to consider is whatever the outcome of that situation in Oxfordshire is, does it add, whatever happens there, does it add more issues and risks to us? And if in our duty to collaborate, I think we need to actually look at that as a separate question, but not get involved in the ongoing runnings of their affair. But I think whatever comes out of that, we need to then consider the outcomes of that against our own risks and liabilities. I think that's the question that I would want, but I think it's far too early in the day to put that question, far too early to ask it. But I think that's the real question that needs to be evaluated. But if we evaluate it now, we interfere in their processes, and we shouldn't be doing that. We should allow them to deal with it. Recognise the point, but that's where I am with it. I don't know what other members think.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. I have Councillor McLean, then Councillor Priestley, and then Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chairman. Picking up on something that Simon mentioned earlier in this conversation, on the last page of the pack, we've got one line that says Westcott Construction New Training Centre Green. I think I would like a sort of a short summary each meeting of how we're getting on, because I remember when we built the Blue Light Hub, we were getting regular reports. It looks great. It's going to open in March 27, but a few headlines each, maybe in your Chairman's report, would be helpful to members to understand how well we're doing, because it is going to be a game changer for training, as Simon's just mentioned.
It is indeed, and we are entirely in the hands of Bucks Council's planning at the present time. Mark might have something to add to that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to bring regular updates on that. We haven't had a huge amount to say so far because there's been a lot of work in the background. I can confirm that planning has now been validated There's been some back and forth with the planning department answering a number of questions they've had. They'll go into site this week to look at the site itself. As the chair says, we're in the hands of the planning department. They've written back to us and their target date for determination currently is, I think, the 2nd of February. But we can keep providing updates as that progresses.
Thank you.
Thank Councillor McLean. Councillor Priestley was next.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question really for Mark in terms of looking at that sort of strategic financial conversation, which we're dipping in and out of as we sort of talk through ASIF's report. You mentioned about the fact that Buckinghamshire is is a high tax base and low precept. And looking at the implications of that for the fair funding review, has there been any conversation about how that might change or might be affected or affect the fair funding review?
Yeah, so the fair funding review, kind of one of the big concepts around it is there's lots of big, predominantly kind of inner London boroughs that charge a very, very low council tax because they get so much from business rates, and it's perceived as that's not fair because you've got people kind of in kind of northern counties paying much more than in London boroughs, and like, how can that be correct? So it's kind of an unintended consequence that it's impacted on fire. It's not really designed to impact fire in that way. The other bit we've made representations on is the way the analysis is done. It's very much based on regression of what's been spent in the past based on demand. Whereas, as we know, fire is not a demand-led service, it's a risk-based service. So we've made those representations. One of the things we would like to see is that if we're getting penalised for being so far down in terms of that Band D precept, okay, that's fine in theory, but you need to give authorities the flexibility to get back up to the average if that's what you think they should be at. So that's one of the representations we've made, is to kind of make sure that fire has got adequate funding to do everything it needs to meet not just demand, but also the risk. As I said before, there's a huge amount of uncertainty around fair funding review. On the positive side, this is going to be a multi-year settlement. We haven't had a multi-year settlement since the last year it finished was 2019-20. So we've been planning 1 year at a time, which does make it really hard when you're looking at your strategic, what's your correct establishment, what can you aspirationally invest in. So at least we'll get some longer term certainty, whether that's kind of positive or negative. At least we'll be able to plan for it much better than we can now.
That multi-year, is it 3 years, 2 years? What is it?
Yeah, my current understanding is it'll be for 3 years.
I was at a meeting in Nottingham on Wednesday of last week where the Deputy Director of MHCLG made a clear indication that it would be a 3-year settlement, and we get the detail very shortly, in fact, on that.
Just going to round up, and I think it's the authority being a victim of prudence, in that it's been got a underspend, but as it's been explained by ASIF, a lot of that underspend is one-off, and some of that was on the fact that the Treasury is doing better than we thought, and as interest rates have gone down slower, but I think they stayed the same last week, and all the commentary is about it. It's on a downward path now, so I think we should all be aware of that. So the Treasury returns aren't going to be as brilliant, and those one-offs are one-offs. Whether it's the Airtel money coming in or the pension money coming in, those are one-offs that we cannot. I don't think you should build into the base. It's a happy happenstance that goes into the reserve. But I fully support the fact that looking at I repeat, as a first order question, what should our establishment be in conjunction what our budget should be? And like has been explained ad nauseum, the uncertainty is what is that fair funding review going to look like? And once we got that, I think nobody around this table is saying that we shouldn't look at the establishment figure and try and maximize it as much as possible, and because that adds to safety, and adds to systems, and adds to the work that the officers do. So I'm more than happy to round that up and say that should be looked at. If there's need for changing the way the report is structured or the members want to look like for different information, please feel free to get in touch. We're more than happy to. This is all electronic, so we can make it as you want and give you the information as you want, because this is supposed to be information sharing and to scrutiny. And you can't do that if you haven't got the information that you want. And I think I'm more than happy, and the officers are more than happy to reconfigure the report however you want to make it clearer, speech marks, or more relevant to what you want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. I'm sure that was very helpful. I think Councillor Rice would like to come back for one more.
It's fine. I just wanted to get on record. It will be a multi-year settlement. That's already been covered. Thank you.
Sorry, the recommendation is that the report is approved as of the forecast as of 30th September 2025 be noted. We're content. Thank you. Date and place of next meeting. Well, certainly the date of the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, the 4th of February at 10 a.m. Thank you very much. I'll see you again in 15 minutes.